We are back, Court Accountability and Legal AF, digging into a stunning new set of findings from Gallup, as reported in the New York Times. Faith in the United States judiciary has sunk to historic lows, down from 59% just a few years ago to 35% public faith in the United States judiciary. This is news that is shocking international experts, causing real alarm. I think we well understand, for reasons we dig into on this program very often, why people are losing that faith. I think there's a lot to unpack here, and we're excited to dig in. Lisa Graves, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I think it's a reckoning that's been long in coming because I think the John Roberts Court has been out of control from, the early gun decision, the Citizens United decision, basically attacking Congress's power to regulate dark money, unleashing this tsunami of cash that leads straight to Elon Musk's efforts to basically buy this election through his so-called outside spending. And then you have, the terrible decision in Dobbs reversing Roe versus Wade. You have this massive number of ethics scandals going back years, and John Roberts literally doing nothing about it. No binding code of ethics, a refusal to testify before Congress, just a hubris about the role of the court. And in fact, you had this year John Roberts putting his fist on the scale of justice, really to help Trump win this election by basically, pardoning him for his past actions, declaring him to be immune from criminal prosecution for his actions around January 6th and beyond, if he can call them, quote, official acts, and also intervening in the Colorado case, where the state of Colorado sought to keep Trump off the ballot as someone who helped spur an insurrection in the United States, and then intervening also for the people that Trump has sought to make into heroes, people who attacked our Capitol on January 6th, a day that resulted in bloodshed and loss of life. So you have a Supreme Court that I think is out of control. And it's been out of control and increasingly so. But the American people, I think, get it. And they're deeply concerned. And I think rightly so.
Yeah, I was particularly struck by some of the commentary in the Times story about the international concern and the concern about how plummeting public faith in judicial integrity is, raises high alarm for the possibility of further assaults on the judiciary. One thing that strikes me, something we talk a lot about in our work, is the sort of unique dimensions to the judicial crisis here in the States. Oftentimes, in authoritarian threats, you see the rise of a strongman, someone like Orban, and then the subsequent effort to shore up the courts to have them be a rubber stamp for the strongman's agenda. In our country, in a way, it's sort of sui generis. It's almost the reverse, right? The courts were very much corrupted as the product of a long-term, decades-long special interest campaign to pervert the law, to rewrite the Constitution, to create the conditions for a strongman like Trump to take power. And I think that is actually what's producing so much of this public distrust in the court, together with these stories of brazen corruption and abuse of power. I think those international concerns do make some sense. And I think we do, to the extent we have some courts and judges that are still acting faithfully to the Constitution and doing their level best to apply law to facts and provide access to justice in the broad majority of the cases that don't sort of incorporate and implicate major political questions. We do want to safeguard that, but on some level, those concerns speak to a problem that is already fully manifested here in our country.
Well, that's right. And as you point out, all the other judges in the country are bound by ethical rules, binding ethical rules, unlike the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we have a unique situation here where not only does the court not have a binding ethics code, we have a Chief Justice who has refused, who has objected to any effort by Congress to redress this, and has done nothing to support the enforcement of the code. For example, letting justices sit on cases involving January 6th that they never should have sat on, like Clarence Thomas, who clearly has an absolute conflict with his wife Jenny's involvement in trying to push Mark Meadows and others to disrupt the election, to overturn the election, including urging the appointment of fake electors to cast their ballots for Trump. I mean, that is such a plain conflict of interest. It's like you can even like a law school exam, you couldn't make up an exam which would be an easier answer. Is this a conflict? Absolutely a conflict. And yet Roberts has stood in the way of efforts to reform the court. And New York Times did a story a few weeks ago that we talked about briefly, which was about the role of these judges behind the scenes to address these ethics concerns or try to address them, and how there was a blockade by some of these Republican appointees to object to any effort to have a binding and enforceable ethical code. And so, as you point out, when you look at the quality of justice in America, civil justice, criminal justice, and more in the state courts and lower federal courts, in general, those judges have been abiding by those ethical rules, although we have this new breed, in essence, of Trump justices or Trump judges down below who seem willing to basically insert themselves into all sorts of issues, like trying to claim that the FDA's approval of the abortion pill 20 years ago is somehow invalid based on, trumped up claims by a group that was manufactured to file a case before that very judge. So we have corruption happening, in my view, at the lower levels, a type of corruption that's political corruption. But in general, in the United States, other judges are following the rules. And in fact, when I've traveled the country and met with some judges and former judges, they're shocked that the Supreme Court justices like Thomas, like Scalia before he passed away, like Alito, would go on these trips with billionaires, would engage in this sort of activity, and also that they would be so brazen about overturning precedents on voting rights, on redistricting, on abortion, other issues, just acting like politicians, not acting like judges.
Yeah. Creating from whole cloth invented immunities to effectively turn Donald Trump into a king. And I'm thinking a few weeks ahead now. Every year on New Year's Eve, the Chief Justice hands down his sort of annual report on the state of the judiciary. And I'm sure it's going to be a bunch of fluff, right? Minimizing these ethics concerns, telling the country that the court's health is as strong as it's ever been, brushing away public criticism, and calling for additional resources. That's another fight that's going on right now. The push for lower court expansion, because there is a judicial crisis, of sort of another sort happening in this country, which is that the courts are under-resourced to handle the volume of litigation that is coming before them. And this is a problem that Democrats and Republicans have both been trying to work through for years now without any progress, because the process has become so politicized. In 2021, I was involved in negotiations around what eventually emerged as the sort of bipartisan deal. Senator Coons and Senator Young, a Democrat and a Republican respectively, were negotiating the terms of what would be a significant addition of new judges to the lower courts. Obviously, that's less politically fraught than a question about expanding the size of the Supreme Court, and one that there's bipartisan consensus needs to happen. But Young and the Republican caucus behind him refused to agree to a single new Biden appointee. They wouldn't agree to allow Biden to have any of those vacancies. And, we had just come off the heels of 4 years in which the Republican Senate had shattered every norm in existence to turn the Senate into a conveyor belt for Leonard Leo's extremists. And from my perspective, certainly it didn't make sense to accede to a deal that would eventually, give yet more dozens of seats to Leo and Trump, which is what is now threatens to happen. The House recently passed what Young and Coons ultimately agreed to, which did agree to those Republican terms to delay all of those vacancies and to immediately give Trump vacancies, as the case may be. Now that we know the results of the 24 election, and I think there will be mounting pressure on Democrats, certainly from Republican dark money operatives and Republican politicians and the like, and I think even from some pro-democracy groups, to agree to this, to sort of solve the, quote, access to justice problem. But it would be foolhardy, in my view, to go along with this, right? What kind of access to justice would we be actually providing just to hand these vacancies to a person that has proven himself committed to advancing judges like Aileen Cannon, who are loyal to him more than loyal to the Constitution or the people?
Well, that's right. I mean, and Aileen Cannon was confirmed after Trump lost the 2020 election. And she was someone who, had very limited experience as a lawyer and was given this role as the judge that, in essence, has jurisdiction in part over Mar-a-Lago, where Trump has lived. And she used her post as a judge to basically help Trump at every turn, so much so that she was rebuked by appellate courts above her until John Roberts and the Republican appointed Supreme Court gave her basically license to dismiss the charges against him, serious charges about taking significant secret documents with him, hiding them, using his butler to try to cover up his theft of those documents, and then to dismiss that case. And so you have a president, former president, who put more than 200 people on the federal bench, some of whom had terrible records, never should have been confirmed to any judicial position, and then have used those judicial posts to aid Trump or to aid his agenda. And I think it's really troubling because, like you said, the issue of the size of the judiciary is something that should be nonpartisan or bipartisan, but the Republicans haven't treated it that way at all. And, I would be in favor of some sort of measure to have a certain number of judges added year by year, just so that it's even-handed or something like that. But that's not the situation we're facing at all. We're facing a situation in which the effort to increase the number of judges in the most recent 4 years was blocked. And now they're trying to bring it back up again. But I want to go to one other thing you said, Alex, about the Chief Justice's year-end report. John Roberts has previously claimed that there are no Republican justices, no Democratic justices, even as he has really advanced the Republican agenda particularly on democracy. Really, it's John Roberts who gutted the key enforcement provisions of the Voting Rights Act. It's John Roberts who was in the thick of changing the rules, basically, with the help of Alito and others, to make it harder for us to have fair representation through the district map drawing. I think that obviously we also saw Roberts basically signaling to the American population that Trump never should have been charged with a crime, basically giving him the blessing of the Supreme Court. And so you have a Supreme Court that has acted in extraordinary partisan ways. And I think that we'll probably see a reprise by John Roberts of this castigation of anyone who calls them Republican justices, even though they are. And as you point out, in terms of the New York Times story and the Gallup poll and the international reaction, it is a crisis in our democracy to have a Supreme Court that has such a lack of confidence by the American people, and is basically continuing to drive forward that agenda with John Roberts's, smiling face, making this assertion, in essence, that he's just a neutral umpire when he's not, and he hasn't behaved that way. And as Mike Podhorzer and you and I discussed on one of our earlier shows, if a Supreme Court in another country appointed by the president or the former president of that party, with a majority or like half of the justices deciding to give immunity, were appointed by that same president, we would be calling out that country as having a corrupted judiciary, a judiciary that has been involved in basically a judicial coup. But like you said, it's sui generis here. It's something that's just unprecedented in American history to have a court behaving in this way. And so we really are on new territory with this court and its actions. And we also have a party, the party that appointed that majority on the Supreme Court, that is also behaving in these really distorting ways within the Senate, within the House, in order to basically cover up crimes, basically deep six the January 6th Commission's tremendous work, and vilify the people who led that effort. People like Jamie Raskin and Liz Cheney and others who devoted their time, their effort to really investigate a matter of incredible importance. The fact that a president of the United States almost refused to abdicate, in essence, to leave his office at the will of the American people and to stay forever, basically because he wanted to. It's so anti-democratic. It's so unhistoric that I think we're still grappling with the fallout of this Supreme Court's politicization with Roberts at the helm as we come into this, 4 weeks away from Inauguration Day.
Certainly we are. And, I wanted to just note, we do read the comments as you guys dig into these conversations. One theme I think that's emerged, at least to my mind, and we really appreciate the words of encouragement. But, I think one thing we hear is like, what can we do? We sort of know a lot of this. Nobody's doing anything about it. I think it falls to the political process, right? Even though we're trained to think about the courts as sort of apart from the political process, I think that's the major theme of a lot of these conversations, is that it very much is not. And if we want to get it back to a place where it is less infected by politics, we actually need to engage with politics to change that. And so and the narrative of this stuff too is, I think, essential, especially in a time of I think way too much anticipatory obedience from the media, from mainstream establishment institutional interests. So we think driving these conversations and spreading these messages is incredibly important. And when these fights come up, there'll be fights over appropriations. John Roberts will come to the Congress singing for his supper to get increased, financial support on the taxpayers' behalf for an institution that now is suffering from the worst public trust in history. And that should be a fight, right? Why should Democrats in Congress agree to appropriate funds to a Supreme Court for things like law clerks if the court will not agree to abide by binding ethics standards? And that's a fight we can pick, right? We can pick a fight over a question like that. We can organize ourselves, and this is what the work we do at Court Accountability. So if you're interested in getting involved with this type of advocacy, please check us out at courtaccountability.org and get involved with our work. We're mobilizing and organizing across a broad pro-democracy ecosystem. These conversations with viewers like you at Legal AF are an instrumental part of building this public understanding and movement consensus to put pressure on the folks that actually will still listen to us on questions like that, on questions like this Judiciary Act, adding new judges, on pushing back around false narratives that we are certain to see Chief Justice Roberts peddle at the end of the year. And so it's just essential that we remain engaged, or else they will continue to run roughshod over our rights and freedoms.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so as the new year begins, as January begins, there will be a number of hearings. They call them confirmation hearings. I call them nomination hearings because I don't want to presume the outcome. But there will be nomination hearings, and I think we will be asking you to call in, to reach out to members about these issues, about the nominations, as well as about other issues that pertain to the courts and justice in America. And we'll be asking you to reach out to members from both parties to have them hear from you, because they need to be hearing from someone other than the megaphone of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And so your voices, it may seem like it's in vain. It's not in vain. Your voices are valuable and important. Oh my goodness, I got a frog in my throat. I sort of choked up there for a second. Sorry about that. But your voices are really important. We cannot hold back our voices as we come into this new era. We need people to stand up, speak out, reach out, and not give up and not give in.
We are grateful for this community. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Again, check out our work at courtaccountability.org. And until next time, signing off.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.